I am a fan of every single person you see on the screen here. I have just watched these women go forward and be bold in marketing, and it's been fantastic to watch. So I'm super excited to be able to facilitate today, to learn, to get sort of inspired and all of that with Brittany, with Melanie, with Christina, and Tracey. They are going to be joining me today as we talk about all of these things. So welcoming everybody here to the show as we get into this. And well, let's just dive right in here with something that maybe, will break the ice a little bit, really getting into the discussion. And let's talk about, just to start things off, really at the highest level, what's something that is still exciting us today? We've seen so much go on in the world of marketing with AI and the pressure and layoffs and the economy and the uncertainty and everything that's going on. What's one thing that's still exciting us these days about our job, even on the toughest days? Mel, I'm going to start with you. So let's start with you and see what's exciting you these days.
One of the things I love about marketing, which is the thing that most of us also, despise on occasion, is that things change so quickly. It feels like it's a new creative problem every single day. And that's really the kind of stuff that I like to work on. So I like the fact that I don't actually know what's going to happen on any given day. And we're going to be solving a problem that I didn't know was a problem yesterday.
Very nice. So basically marketing is really, it's kind of it. Brittany, how about you? Welcome back. I think we have you back now. We had some technical challenges, but you're back now, yes?
Yes, and you should be able to hear me.
You're good to go. Yeah.
Perfect. So I like to consider the 10,000-foot view. The things that are the most frustrating to me oftentimes, I have to remember, are the things that I was desperate to get on my plate only a few years prior. So it helps to kind of reframe the grudge into gratitude when I remember that this is what I've been working for.
Very nice. That should be the name of the next marketing book, Grudges to Gratitude. I like that. That is really great. Christina, how about you?
I love that no matter what challenges we face, no matter what tech innovations that we're seeing, we still have to come back to the human problem. We still have to come back to this evergreen need for connection and community and trust. And so no matter what we're facing, there's always this evergreen nugget of we need to show up for each other. And so I love that no matter what challenges we face or what new things kind of pop up tomorrow, there's still that need for connection.
Yeah, boy, that's a challenge these days, isn't it? I mean, with the remote work and work from home and all of the stuff we have to do with Zoom these days, marketing can end up looking a lot like a check the box sort of task. Hey, have you updated your Kanban board? Okay, we're all good though, right? So checking in on each other is such an important piece of that. Tracey, how about you?
Yes. Hi. I am excited about so many things, but one of the ones right now is, I've been in, as a lot of people here have been, content marketing for the last 15 years. And with a lot of the AI innovations, it is very fun to break down the entire content marketing production process that I've known historically and get to rebuild it from the ground up with new tools, new thinking, more creativity, and doing that with a larger team. So that's just really exciting.
Nice. Very nice. Okay. Well, now that we've sort of gotten everybody all warmed up, we're all ready to go. We don't have our wine, which is just, so disappointing to me, but we'll make it work otherwise. So let's get into our first topic that we want to talk about that's really getting into the meat of this stuff. So one of the things that we have heard for, years, it feels like, is marketing having a seat at the strategy table. But, when we think about it, marketing having a seat at that strategy table, it's really, there's the sort of, did we earn it? Have we earned it? Have we gotten there? And marketing as a function, really, not necessarily just the individual. But let's talk about what it really takes these days from your perspective out there in terms of what it really takes to get a seat at the table. Brittany, maybe I'll come back to you to start here and see what you're thinking these days.
Absolutely. Case studies are my greatest ally when it comes to bringing a new idea to maybe the C-suite table or helping a team understand why a new initiative might be beneficial for the overall growth of the team or the overall strategy and development of the brand. And so, yes, sometimes it feels like all we're doing is making decks, but those decks, those case studies, those research, even the bit of desk research that we do can be hugely beneficial for showing people what the impact is, kind of maybe opening their mind to a new process, helping them see the steps along the way that's going to help them achieve success. I just find that to be incredibly helpful.
Yeah. How do you get leaders these days, you know, especially the CEO who is so pressured for short-term results? How do we get senior leadership to really start to buy into this idea of long-term programs, long-term ideas that are going to take more than a quarter to sort of realize results and all of that sort of thing?
Absolutely. It's kind of blending what we've learned from some of our project manager friends with the agile system, in which we try to provide value at every step. So even though the full result of the project may not come out for a year, we can say, you know, within 2 months, you're going to start to see a transformation of how you talk about your brand. Within 4 months, you're going to start to see a transformation of how others talk about your brand. And within 6 months, you're going to see a whole new share of market opening up for you. Within a year, you'll get all the additional tangible results, but there's going to be steps along the way where you're still winning.
Yeah. Anybody else have any ideas in terms of how about the culture side of things, right? There's sort of the you know, we always hear the sort of, you know, culture eats strategy for breakfast idea, right? And it's this idea that strategically we know how to do it, but how do we change this culturally with our management team?
I can take
Anybody
this
have
on.
any ideas?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
For me, I see so many people, especially ICs, and they want more people to believe in their work, know what they're doing, but they don't realize that that onus is on them. And so when you're managing up, I remember being in that place myself where I was like, why do I have to manage up? Why do I have to teach you how I do my job? Why do I have to like tell leadership why this is important? Not realizing that's how they find out. Like, you want to advocate for yourself, managing up is your first at bat. That's where you get to tell your story. You get to tell your narrative. If there's a metric they don't think is important, that's on you to explain it. That's on you to educate. And so what I think a lot of marketers get burned out on is they think that the work will be good enough on its own. And it really isn't, sadly. You have to have the talk track. You have to educate others on why they should work with you, why this metric is important versus something else. You get to control the narrative. It isn't a pill. It's an opportunity for you to control the narrative of how people talk about your work. So make managing up be a part of your process. It is a part of your job whether you do it or not. But if you do it, you get to control the narrative. You get to be the reason why they know why you've been doing great work, and they see the visibility, and they know when they can come to you, and they know what your wins are so they can help you shout them out. But you can't assume someone's going to look for your wins. They're just not going to do that. They've got their own stuff.
I love that note about it being part of your job, whether you do it or not, is such a good point. And it ties into one of the things that I try to do is often echo back to them before I start something that is one of their objectives, right? And this might be more psychology than marketing, but it's like, you've said in the past that you really want us to XYZ, or that your biggest priority is XYZ. We know that the best way to do that, or historically, or point to some data, is to ABC. So it's like putting their own words back on the table to say, like, this is the directive we as a company are focused on, and here's how our actions align to that. I find that it helps keep from getting lost in like shiny object syndrome. You're like grounding the conversation and the shared goal right at the beginning.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. The internal comms piece is a huge part of your job. I mean, honestly, to a large extent, should be 50% of your job. You're not just marketing externally, you have to market internally as well. I'm sure there's some stats out there on this, but you want to be repeating your wins, your strategy, the names of your programs so many times that you are sick of saying them. I think you have to say it like 3 to 15 times, but your goal is to start hearing other people saying it back to you. And if you aren't hearing that, then you haven't advocated for it enough. You haven't roadshowed it enough. You haven't gotten the green light that you really need.
Yeah, it's amazing. I used to have a colleague who said to me, I'd say he worked at a larger company, and he would say in marketing, and he would say it's not what you do, it's what they think you do.
Yeah.
And so it's in so many ways, if you don't manage the internal comms, the managing up piece of this, it won't be anything you do. It'll be what they believe you do. And that's not, and if they're shaping that narrative, it's never going to be in your favor, right? You know, in other words, it's not going to be something that you like better than what you're actually doing, you know?
Yes. And especially when you're kind of in that mid to senior level role, you know, you are probably still working as an independent contributor, but you're also helping to manage the story of the project. And when you're an independent contributor, you get your feedback, you always are continuously making things better. But when you're the manager, sometimes things go wrong or things go awry. And part of that skill set is being able to manage the perception of the project and manage the narrative. And leaders will see that you're somebody who can maintain your cool and you can maintain the positive outcome mindset despite the challenges.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
One
like
of the
part of this
tactical ideas that I've seen really work here is, you know, when you do your stand-ups or your weekly meetings or whatever it is, and you sort of, you communicate, take time for a little bit of ritual at the beginning of all of these stand-ups to share cross-functional wins, share sort of processing of what worked, what didn't work before we sort of get into the topic of, okay, what do we have ahead of us, et cetera. Any other sort of, or even expansion on that idea, any other ideas that you all have seen from a tactical perspective of how to actually do that internal comms and make sure that senior leadership understands what we really do?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is, for me at least, there are rituals around like regular Slack updates. So like expected Slack updates with metrics, monthly cadences, a lot of documentation, ideally in one place that everyone knows where they can go and that it's going to be updated there. And then I also focus a lot on pass downs as well. So there's like the managing up part of it, but then there's also the taking that information back down to your team with weekly pass downs to make sure they have the, leadership insight that you do to make the right decisions in their roles too.
Love that. Love that. Anybody else got any sort of tactical tips on what we might do?
This might be basic, but I just find that it helps so much. I will often ask the senior leaders, like, what is the best way for us to update you? Because I had one client I was working with, we would send these like weekly, like incredible, like reports, and it was like so detailed. We put so much work into it. And at one point it was very clear that it was not being consumed. It was not being read. It was not being understood. So I asked, like, hey, have you seen the reports? Like, have you looked at our documents? They're beautiful. And he's like, oh no, I never opened those. I assumed those were for like other people that were CC'd on the email. I'm like, all right, well, what would be best for you? And they were like, if you could send me at the end of the week, just like 5 key bullet points. I was like, oh my God, it saves us so much effort, so much design time. Like, they just wanted 5 bullet points in an email where the subject line was like marketing recap. Like, that's all they wanted. And that made everybody's lives so much easier. So ask.
Why don't you just tell me the name of the movie you'd like to see? Yeah.
I think tied
Sorry,
to
that's
that
a Seinfeld
too,
reference. I couldn't resist. I couldn't resist. All right, let's move on to our next topic here, which is all about metrics and measurement, which, yay, we have metrics nailed, said no marketing ever. And so let's talk about this, though, because from a best practices, from what's going on today, I'd really love to get into it just a little bit. And spoiler alert, Christina, I'm going to come to you first on this, but it's this idea that when executives want numbers, they, we just, our gut instinct is to default to some of those things that are going up and to the right, our clicks, our leads, but especially these days, those things are really changing. So what are we seeing out there from sort of really valuable metrics, measurements that we can start to use to demonstrate whether it's long-term brand, whether it's content effectiveness, whether it's our marketing effectiveness, those case studies that we talked about before? Christina, let's start with you with what are you seeing out there?
Well, I think I'm glad that this is the next topic, because I think it frames really, really well off of what Melanie was talking about. And like, what do you want to see? You could have the most successful program, But if that leader thinks they're going to get fired if a certain metric is not covered and that metric is not visibly obvious in your work, they are hearing the Charlie Brown teacher when you talk, because it does not it's valuable, but if it is not valuable to them, then that is the litmus test for pass or fail. And so when you're reframing metrics, because we talked about earlier, we have like these layoffs and we have this deeply scarcity mindset going on a lot through corporate. And that's when you will rely on statistics and metrics that don't necessarily tell the story. So you could go from like 100 followers on Twitter to, I'm not gonna call it X, to 300. And then you go on the deck and it's like, it's a 3,000% increase. Look at all this. I was like, babe, you added 200 people. Right. Like, that's great, but like, let's call that what it is. But that's what you have is you're looking for the metrics that aren't telling the story. They're telling the shiniest story. They're telling the prettiest story. They're going to look the most successful in a deck. But as soon as someone asks you a question about that, they'll be like, so you really only added 200 people. Okay, noted. And so you lost the argument as soon as they started like tipping away at it. And so you need to have an understanding of what matters to leadership. And sadly, you need to understand what happens at every layer of leadership, because a lot of ICs are expecting middle management to tell the story to them. And you cannot wait for them to tell you the story. You have to do the work. And a lot of this message is going to be like, I'm sorry, ICs, you gotta be an eldest daughter here. You just got to do it. You can't wait for someone to save you and tell you what metric you should care about. You need to be able to, like, what I would start doing is, if you work for a public company, you need to start listening to the quarterly earnings calls, because you want to know what your CEO cares about. They care about what is happening on those calls. They care about what the earnings numbers are. They care about net new revenue. They care about churn. They care how the stakeholders are feeling. They care what questions are being asked. If there's a mention of roadmap or there's a mention of like market changes. If you want to know what your CEO cares about, they care about that. And if you can ladder up your work to any of those metrics that they care about, you will win, because you can tell, on this level, on the ground level, here's what my work does. Middle level, this is how it's going to make my leadership look good, how it's going to help other teams. And then also, here's why my CEO is going to love me. Here's why my CEO is going to be able to talk about my work and say, her work is specifically feeding this number. She's helping prevent churn. She's adding new revenue. She's doing whatever. But you have to be able to make that translation to what middle management and what your CEO cares about. And if you're not already doing this, you should do a Google alert for your company's name. Yeah. So if they are highlighted in a news item. That's some drop the mic
advice there.
Yes.
If there's a news item, you're going to know good or bad. Your CEO is in a bad mood. If you saw the Google alerts of what they've been talking about, you'd be like, I'd be in a bad mood too. Or if they're a partner, let's say that there's a big partner of your company and they just filed for bankruptcy, that's going to impact your revenue. So you need to be thinking about that. Is the brand name mentioned in any of those press releases? Staying on top of what's being mentioned and then being able to say, like, because of this is the trickle down. That's going to help you figure out why your metrics matter to them. It's going to be able to help you tell that story. And then when you're doing that list that Melanie talked about, like, just give me 4 or 5 bullet points. You can say, this is what we're doing, which leads to an increase in this, which leads to an increase in this. And I know this is what you care about. I know this is what the CEO wants to see. And that will make them care.
Nice. Nice. Anybody? I have a follow-up question, but then I want to let everybody else sort of chime in as well. But I definitely have a follow-up question for the group that follows right onto that, Christina. So anybody else?
Yeah, I'd love to kind of add on to that, because what you're saying is so essential, because a lot of times we, as that marketer in that middle phase in the organization, we are the key storyteller. There are thoughts and ideas happening up in the C-suite. There are thoughts and actions happening with your independent contributors. And it's sort of your job to make it all make sense. And so to your point, it is also especially important for marketers to be involved in this process from the very beginning, because oftentimes we have the insight from the client, from our leadership of what the goals that we're trying to achieve are. And we can help our strategy and analytics teams, our ICs, be able to make their work count towards those goals. So oftentimes, again, we have that critical information. We're the critical storytellers, and we're the ones that are making it all make sense.
Fascinating. Tracey, I see you nodding your head vigorously.
I agree with all of this. Listening to earnings calls, I have a Google alert set up that I get every single morning, read through all of the press, understanding how people are responding to your earnings call, also super important, the questions folks ask. And then, our metrics are very much tied to like content metrics in general, how much traffic we're driving, how much pipeline we're driving, how much revenue we're driving, and then of course closely associated with our PR team to help aid in media and mentions. Another metric that we have been focusing on a lot more recently in order to help us secure more budget is total cost of asset produced, which with AI, we are beginning to be able to really reduce, especially as we go global. And so we've been able to really increase our content spend, showing that we can produce far more, what that's going to map back to, really like forecasting out overall metrics as well as ROI. And a lot of that really does go back to Christina listening to our earnings calls and getting a really great understanding of what is super important to our senior leadership as well as to the market and building strategies that address that.
Yeah. Mel, anything to ask? I want to ask this follow-up question, but I want to make sure that you get, if anything, you've got anything that you want to add to that?
No, everything incredible has been said already by these three.
Excellent. 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 Well, here's my follow-up question for any of you or all of you, which is, I so love this advice that you're giving about following the earnings call, getting on Google Alerts, getting into the actual business itself. One of the trends that I have seen since COVID really, but maybe even before that, and maybe this is especially true in B2B marketing, which is I find that there's been a trend of marketers that don't really pay much attention or care about the topic of the business, right? In other words, I would ask them like, tell me about your competitive set, or tell me about the business, or tell me about the product, or and the answer is, I'm just here to make sure that SEO is optimized. I'm just here to make sure that email is working. I'm just here to make sure that and they gamify the digital aspects of marketing to the point where they're really good at managing the email system, or managing the content management system, or managing the metrics and all of that, but don't have any clue about the actual context of the business simply because they have no interest in it. And so I would love to get your take on career success, and especially, and I know it's especially hard in some B2Bs because hey, we sell rain gutters for a living, right? It's like, it's not the sexiest topic in the world, right? And so I'd love your take on marketers, especially younger marketers, becoming experts in the business that they work for, especially in today's heavy churn, sort of temporal nature of the marketing position. Any takes on that?
I mean, because of that heavy churn, I can understand a young marketer's inclination to feel like if this business is not invested in me in my career, I am not going to invest in specializing myself. Like, I can psychologically understand that urge. But I do think that lacking context is a privilege that none of us have anymore. Like, you can't do that in this environment anymore. As we talked about before, the speed that everything's changing, and the fact that regardless of not understanding how to sell rain gutters means you don't truly understand your audience. It means you don't truly understand the metrics that your CEO cares about. Like, you need that deep understanding to understand all the other things that are very important, even if you don't feel like your competitive set is playing into your everyday action. So, I mean, while I can understand the urge, I think it's absolutely necessary if you want to continue to grow.
Businesses also exist to help people, right? And in theory, this isn't always true, but in theory, the more successful a business is, the better they help their customers, the better they solve those pain points. And for me, early in my career, I mean, even now I'm looking at, we have a question in here from someone on team morale. And I'm like, I very much view my job as trying to show up to help people use tools to get a job done, to eliminate the stress, what's keeping them up at night, if you're selling rain gutters to like stop your foundation from getting wet and like I need gutters so bad, I'm like in the market, so I know like all of the reasons why someone might need gutters. But yes, like if you don't put yourself in the person's shoes, it doesn't matter how much you gamify it. Marketing's so much fun because you can gamify it. Like some of the best marketers, one in particular that I know was like world champion in the Tony Hawk video game at one point in time, right? Like marketers love to gamify, but you have to show up as your customer to truly have that empathy, understand what topics are going to work best. And again, you are helping people solve real problems that impact their daily lives, the income they can make, the way they want to leave an impact on the world.
I agree with all of that.
That's fantastic.
I think there's also something else that we need to discuss too, especially with the younger marketers, is that there's kind of this perfect storm that's also proliferating too, where I think a lot of them understand that in order to raise the bar for themselves, to get promoted and to go into leadership, that they should have the business acumen. I think a lot of them are rejecting it on purpose. They want to stay in the trenches, especially creatives. Especially in the creative space, we are deeply ambitious. We're deeply imaginative, until we realize we become a pencil pusher and we're like, wait. This is not what my brain wants. My brain wants to create. I don't want to have other people create. I want to be the person doing it. And so I have so many friends in the creative space who've gone up to be a CD and then have gone back to be like, no, I want to make it. I want to have my hands be dirty. And so I think there's a lot of people who are rejecting it, not because they don't want to understand their customers, not because they don't want to understand the business, but they're openly rejecting the ladder. They're like, I've seen millennials and Gen X climb the ladder, and I don't want that journey for me. And so I think what we're seeing with Gen Z specifically, which is really lovely to see, is that they are reinventing what that looks like. Like, it's not a different career ladder. Like, I feel like they took the ladder and they put it in a bonfire somewhere, and they're just like, we'll just figure it out. We'll make something else, or we'll figure it out, but we're doing something different. And I think that they've watched people get laid off after 15 years at a company. They've watched companies have record profits, but still have layoffs. I think that as much as there is and I agree with you, Melanie, we don't have the luxury of not understanding our business marketing position. But I do think that there is a nugget of people who are like, I am actively rejecting that knowledge because I know what's on the other side of it for me.
Yeah, it's such a great point.
Holistically agree with that. But I also wish in my heart, maybe I'm a little old fashioned, that this spirit of leadership doesn't get left behind in all of this, because I think that, as a marketing leader or somebody who is hoping to take maybe your career to the next step, or even take your project capacity to the next step. And it's kind of hard to build a 5-channel, 200 asset campaign all by your lonesome. And so, how can you as a leader provide that enthusiasm that is going to make your team excited to learn about the minutia of gutters? What are some different meeting techniques that you can have? I like to have active research brainstorms where I'm saying, okay, we have 30 dedicated minutes where we're all going to get on a call, and we're also all going to get on Google, and we're going to pull up all the wildest news stories that we can related to our product or service, throw that into a chat, respond to it, get immersed into it, and then start the ideas.
I love that, and it's a perfect segue to our next topic, because it's a challenge that I put to senior. It's not just the younger marketers challenge, right? It is also a senior leadership challenge as well, which is they have to take the time to want to invest in the education of. I have seen too many times where young marketers in larger organizations I don't know who to go to. I don't know what the topic is. I don't even know who to go to for experts. And then you go to the experts and they go, it's not my job to teach you. And it's like, yeah, it kind of is. It kind of is your job to teach the younger generation of the job and what it entails. It gets us a fantastic sort of segue to our next topic, which is around budget and budget advocacy, because I have too much time and too much money. Also said no marketing person ever. But basically, when we start to think about the modern marketing organization, and where our CFO doesn't even like to mention the word brand because they just don't get it. They don't get the financial aspects of it. So how do we start to speak the language of finance in a better way. It's regarding, you know, measurement in so many ways. And Brittany, spoiler alert, I'm going to come to you first on this, which is how do we start to really build a budget case that's both creative and credible and actually is going to sort of reframe metrics in a way that finance understands?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing as a marketer is that you have to get involved with the money. A lot of times we want to just be on the creative side, and especially as we move up that leadership ladder, being able to track budget hours and project consistency is a huge part of that role. And so being unafraid to discuss money is sort of the first step. Then figuring out, how do budgets get structured? You know, we have our annual budget, but we may also have a quarterly budget. And so you want to look at that and say, maybe we have some longer term goals that are a little bit more expensive. Those are a little bit harder to buy in, but maybe we have some micro ideas, some very, very short term things with smaller investments that lead to a more unique, niche, or specialized result. So that could be saying, hey, I found a different ad format. It's a little different than what we've been doing, but it might, you know, because it's new, it might resonate with the app platform and give us an extra little bit of a boost. Or we could say, hey, we've noticed that we're falling behind. You know, we lost an RFP because we don't have the specialists on our team to compete. Can we contract in a subject matter expert, or, you know, dedicate a couple extra hours to training so that we can be more competent on our skill level? So ultimately, you want to drive all of these financial risks that you're taking back to some tangible win that's likely going to have value every step of the way.
Yeah, fantastic. Who else has some advice on budget? It's honestly one of the trickiest things historically in marketing. I've been doing this for 35 years, which I've got now the gray hair to show it, but it's fascinating that budget is always sort of the stickiest widget that we have to actually work on.
Tracey, I want to hear more about what is it? TCAP, your new acronym, the costs of asset, whatever it is. Tell us more about TCAP.
Yes. Yeah, well, so gosh, I've been deep in this. I mean, as y'all know, we have H2s coming up, a new quarter. So I've been deep in some budget work. But yes, so we calculate per asset, total cost per asset produced. And then as we bring on new tools, new team members, consultants, we rely on consultants quite a bit, or contractors quite a bit, to help prove out models. It's a much safer kind of like testing environment where you could cut that cost in a quarter if nothing pans out from it, or if the goals that you're expecting don't pan out. So that's really helpful. But yeah, especially as we're bringing on AI tools, we really are looking at total cost of asset produced, and backing into ROI metrics there, total savings. Of course, we're building out incremental that also backs all the way down into like actual business revenue as well. But it has been a really helpful thing for our leaders to see how many assets we can produce in each region right now, how much that costs per asset, and then to see that dramatically decline over like quarter over quarter over quarter as AI usage and competency just gets better, is amazing. We've even been able to build in like additional seats, right? And additional seats is in like head count, where, yeah, you are just showing we can speed up our quantity to hit very specific goals, and we can do it in a way that is high quality. For us in particular, we aren't just looking at like AI production like alone. Of course, like we build in human checks into that, particularly around editing needs, and so we are looking to invest more there. But yeah, we measure things across the board. And then my like final piece of advice, and of course this is at larger organizations, at startups, this wasn't so much the case. If I can't get like marketing to fully cover something, I got a big organization. How many other orgs can go in on this with me? And how can we split cost across the company? So go find your friends, go like build that groundswell. That's going to be a much easier buy for your finance team, for your procurement team, if it's not just you that wants to use it.
Yeah. You know, it's yet another area where I often challenge leadership in terms of budgeting, which is the consistency, right? Because what I know is that marketing practitioners, everybody on this call for sure, and certainly those that are practitioners in the business, we're really good at just exactly what you said, Tracey, right? Where we can figure, we can solve the puzzle, right? We can Kobayashi Maru this stuff all day long, right? Where we figure out exactly how to, but it's that inconsistency that often happens, right? It's like marketing budgets. We know that come the second quarter, if things aren't looking that great, we know, so we're going to use up all of our budget right away because we know it's going to come, that weird cut's going to come, or it might come, or whatever. And so consistency in budgeting, what I've always said is, because if you set a marketing budget based on only the idea that you're actually thinking through this thing is around the timing of budget, then you're going to be SOL, as it were, from getting optimized metrics. Let's move on to our next topic here, and actually get to the creative side of things, and it's talking about how do we actually look at creative, right? So protecting that creative, interestingly enough. So marketing, we know it's fast paced. We know that we're moving faster than we've ever moved before. AI is certainly pushing in that direction. How do we protect the time and space for our teams to actually really get creative without getting burned out, without moving so fast that we're sort of, always trying to figure out how we get out of this burnout phase? How do you protect the time? And maybe Mel, I'll start with you here, which is, how do we actually start thinking about this from a creativity standpoint?
So the biggest thing for me, and this is something I'm talking all the time with my clients, with organizations, is I think when we have this reactive environment and this fast pace, what happens is we start squishing together parts of the process that are meant by design to be separated. And so the biggest one that I see is research has shown that the best ideas come from two phases of thinking. You have the divergent thinking first, like think big, no bad ideas, yes, and we're building. And then you have convergent thinking, where you hone it in, you polish it, you come to the final idea. When you have 15 minutes to be brilliant before the next call, like, you are not having that. You are by design, in that tight timeline, having to try to build and edit at the same time, and it does not work. It creates like nonstop negativity. People are afraid to speak up. So like, the faster you try to create the good creative, the least likely your environment is going to be to actual creativity happening. So the biggest thing that I talk about is separating those two as best you can, even if it's like before lunch and after lunch, or morning and afternoon. Let's do the big picture thinking. Let's marinate and then come back and make that decision later on when you have time to think about it. Separating even just a little bit between those two phases of the thinking, I have found manages to preserve that creativity even when you have to work in a fast-paced environment.
Love that. Who else
Melanie,
has some thoughts on creativity?
I absolutely love that, because I use a very similar method. I've had to manage a lot of quick turn projects. Some of them are going from brief to publication in as little as 4 days. So there's not a lot of room to throw spaghetti at the wall there. I have for many years been using the Edward de Bono theory of the 6 thinking hats, in which you get into the conversation, you say, okay, we're all going to put on the green hat. This is our green hat of big ideas. And everybody gets to say everything they want. If somebody starts getting into like, well, that's not going to work, then I'll just remind them, hey, that's a red hat thought. And we're going to save red hat for later in the conversation. So structuring the thinking, giving everybody room to have that creative space, I find is incredibly important. But then also I found that structure is hugely, hugely beneficial, especially for a fast process. And structure often means getting the right information that you need. I tend to find that most of the drama or the difficulty that arises on creative projects comes from a scarcity mindset, in which we're unsure of what the deliverables are, or we're unsure of a timeline, or what the red thread is really trying to be. And so if I know that I have something coming through that's going to be disruptive or difficult or very fast turn, I'm going to do some work on the back end first, as much as I can, to get all the information, to maybe have that 15-minute with the client just solo, where I can rapid fire get all the things I need. or I'm going to pre-develop a materials and requisites document so that it's a plug and play situation, and we know that we can move into our beginning phases with abundance.
That's awesome. Bonus points, by the way, for the Tamsin Webster reference to red thread. So awesome stuff there. Sorry, Tracey, were you going to say something?
I was just saying, like, those are like, my answer to this is so boring, and y'all's is just so thoughtful and creative. And I'm going to go look both of those up because I feel like there's more I could be doing. On my end, I stick really closely just to capacity planning and making production process incredibly clear with as strict of timelines as possible around each one of those stages. Now, sometimes we have to compress, but I do view it as part of my job to push back on external folks to protect the capacity of each individual as well as the production process, because that's built in ideally to allow them to be more creative and to have the time that they feel like they need to have in order to do their best possible work. And again, that doesn't mean sometimes things don't get squished, that they always get that time, but that piece of it does feel really important. And we have regular check-ins on our one-on-ones to ask, like, how much is on your plate? How do we prioritize? What do we move off? Where do you feel like you're not being able to put your best work? Like, how can we shift those things around to give people the time they need to make sure that they're getting their creative work in?
What about one of the challenges that I often observe in, teams are flatter these days, right? There's, and so the good news is that in many cases there is more creative collaboration that happens, right? The flip side of that, the implication, the other side of the sword, if you will, is that collaboration can often become sort of messy in terms of an arbiter of good, like someone who actually makes the decision that this is good, right? This is the right version of this. Somebody at some point has to decide, right? And how are you seeing that play out in terms of either getting to a final decision, like this is done, like we are done, we are ready to go with this, versus sort of this is, feeding that collaborative step at every step along the way?
I don't know if this is a popular answer, but I think documentation can solve a lot of these problems. Because if we're not clear on who's making that final decision, that means nobody's clear on that. And that means this process will always be messy. So one of the first things that I often do when I'm working with groups is like, I want to see an org chart that shows whose decisions overrule whose other decisions, if that's how it's structured. And I want to see the workflow that shows it goes from this person to this person to this person, and when is it allowed to backtrack and when is it not. Like that all has to be figured out, because if we're trying to figure it out on the fly on an individual campaign or a project, it's just a recipe for disaster. So I mean, not that we have time to just take a break and do documentation, but I'm a big fan of making sure that all those decisions are made and documented so that we're not having to think about it in the moment.
Yeah.
And kind of almost going back to what Tracey said before, where, and I love what you said about being the leader, protecting your team. If you know that you are that person, being willing to stand in that energy is so incredibly important, because especially once we're getting into creative execution, this is usually the last phase of the project. We've already probably lost a lot of time somewhere. And so now we are kind of rushing. We're getting pressure from the bottom of people who are burnt out and pressure from the top because they want to see that deliverable. And so you're absorbing a lot of tension here. And when you are somebody who is willing to stick up for your team or to look out for their best interests, I know in my early career as an independent contributor, those were the managers that I worked the hardest for. Those were the ones that I would be working all night without a single complaint. This only took me 5 minutes. It was 50 days, but it felt like 5 minutes in my heart.
If only I could make how long it took people like in their hearts as part of my capacity planning. That would be great.
I love that. I love that perception of time for sure. Let's move on to our last topic before we get to our lightning round. But our last topic, which is very related here, and it's one that honestly might be the rantiest one I've ever deal with in my career, which is marketing and content in so many ways. When we talk about storytelling and we talk about creation and we talk about all of the materials, is where marketing gets treated like a service desk. And I'm telling you that there are businesses, hopefully none of you are like this, but there are businesses out there that still have their marketing team on an SLA, like literally where they're under an SLA to perform within a certain amount of time to get stuff out the door, which is absolutely baffling to me. And I could go off on a 20-minute rant about that. But how do we start building the trust in this culture? And we can do this relatively quickly before we get to our lightning round, of course. But how do we start building that in so that marketing isn't under an SLA, like where there's a trust built in terms of the process of everything we just talked about, protecting the team, the creative process, and what we're doing, so that it takes as long as it takes. It takes as long as our heart time says it's going to take. It takes as long as it takes to get the good quality, high value stuff out the door. What do y'all think about that?
I can take this on. As someone who has like a social media background, you need to make nice with legal immediately and often. And you need to know, like, you said no, why did you say no? You don't want to do this? Why? What I would do is anytime you see you get a bump in the road or something that like an approval that's taking too long, you need to earmark that. What was the delay? Who was the delay? And how can I have a relationship with that person before I need their approval again? So I know how to reword things, frame things, make it clear, already come with everything they need. Be like, oh, you have objections? I have an answer to every objection. Oh, you want to know why we should do this? Here's a list of people who are doing something similar. Like, you need to build those relationships, because if you are just throwing your ideas into an approval workflow, you are set up for failure. The relationships are going to be what changes that no to a yes. They're going to let you know what they can't do, what they're not going to do, what, like, if I just tweak it a little bit, the risk doesn't feel as big to them. But you don't know that if you don't know that. And so you got to have those relationships. You got to know why they're saying no. And you got to build out a process for approval that is not just, I'm going to Slack you, or I'm going to put it into this form and hope that it gets out of the void. You have to have those one-to-ones, those human connections, those relationships, so that when someone says no, it's not just a no. It's not just legal doesn't let us do anything fun. It's here's the reason, here's their actual reason behind it, so that the next time you pitch, they're going to have to explain, like, no, I fixed it. I got rid of every risk you had. I can back up other brands that are doing the exact same thing. You're still saying no. What's different this time? And that's how you're going to get those approvals. That's how you're going to build that agility that we've talked about in here. Because once they understand, like, I'm not trying to get you fired. I'm not trying to get us sued. I'm not trying to have the FTC come yell at us. I just want to do something fun. I just want to, like, jump on this, like, high culture moment. But you got to do that.
When you talk about a process is such a key piece there. One of the things that we recommend in that case, especially for those that are in compliance and legally restricted areas, pharmaceuticals and financial services and healthcare and all of that, is build in what we call a red light, yellow light, green light process with legal and compliance, right? Where you a priori have that conversation with them to say, this is going to be green content, which we'll look at in the rear view mirror. This is yellow, where we need a fast look at this. And this is red light content, where we know it's going to take you time to review all this stuff. Anybody else very quickly have any thoughts on sort of getting marketing out of that sort of on-demand vending machine sort of status?
Just a little addition to that is I like building what we call an objection checklist. So it sounds very similar to what you're talking about, Christina, which is like, you need to have the list of all those reasons, and that list needs to be accessible to anyone, like all your ICs, anyone who is doing creative. I've even had orgs go so far as whatever the document template that they submit in has the checklist at the top that says, before sending this, before uploading, before sending, whatever the process is, you have to ensure and manually check the box that you have included the metadata, that you have copyright for the photo, like all the common objections that are going to stop this thing from getting to the finish line. And then if nothing else, it gives you accountability, right, for those common problems that are causing those bottlenecks over and over again.
Yeah. Also, your marketing department is very much your internal solutions department as well. So if you're leading that team, set up 15 minutes with the leaders across your org. Figure out where their pain points are. Figure out how you can solve them. Are they struggling with recruitment and retention? Is that something that you can lend to across social or outreach messaging? Are they struggling with getting the right resources, that's something that you are probably steeped in deeply and can help them, see the wider picture. So, just continue to build those relationships. Yeah.
And remember, that's not going to happen overnight either. Like if you are at an organization where your marketing team or content team is just taking tickets and fulfilling them, like your marketing or content team is in a position where others don't trust the like ideas or the strategy coming out of them, you have to fix that. And that's going to take time. So, I mean, there's probably a world in which you are still fulfilling those tickets and also doing tests on the side, building decks so that you can go and build those relationships and helping other teams really understand how marketing works, why it's important, why the strategies you're recommending will work, what metrics they back into. But yeah, if you are in that position where you're taking a lot of tickets, you have to be strategic in how you change that narrative, and you also have to be patient.
Yeah, boy, that goes all the way back to what we talked about at the top of the show too, which is this idea of internal comms, right? Which is this idea of saying, first of all, if we're calling it trouble tickets, which it's like the fact that it's called a trouble ticket when it goes into the marketing team, it's like, okay, that's a problem, right? That we need to stop that today, right? But even beyond that, it's exactly to your point. It's like really building in that idea of the trust and in the process and all of that is such a huge piece of this. Okay, quickly now, what we're going to do is we're going to get to some lightning round questions. And so these are what we're calling Spark strategies, right? So, and this is something, by the way, we're going to carry forward into content marketing world this year as well. Really super practical, tactical things that we can actually do on Monday morning to actually move the needle. So pick any of the topics, pick anything you want for the group here. And what I want is in 1 or 2 sentences, really give me something that the marketers on this event can take with them on Monday morning and do this week to start to reclaim their energy, their influence, and their positivity in feeling great about marketing again. And maybe Brittany, I'll start with you just to start the round robin here.
Sure. This is this career draws some of the most interesting and innovative people in the world to it. And they are all working in your organization. Find the people that give you that spark, that you have that creative resonance with. Make them your community, whether they're on your team or not. And on Monday mornings, just send that Slack or that Teams message that, hey, how you doing? Hope you're having a great week. It might not move the needle in the short term, but in the long term, you're going to have more people in your corner. You're going to have more people who believe in you, and you're going to have more support to bring your visions to life.
Fantastic. Tracey, how about you? Go next.
Great. So mine is AI. So I promise this is going to be better than what y'all are thinking. But we've talked a lot about documentation and process in here, and AI can help in a lot of ways. But I found using like the voice notes portion of AI to define a problem that I am trying to solve, and then asking AI to help build out documentation or document a process for me gets me like 70% of the way there, where like earlier in my career, it would have taken me hours to build something out, if not longer, but I can get something really, really quickly that feels really thoughtful that I can then go in and edit. So come Monday morning, whatever your problem is, I would open up ChatGPT if you're allowed to use it. If you're not, don't. And use that voice note portion of it. That piece has worked far better for me. You're able to get a whole lot more nuance in there to ultimately get what you want.
Awesome. Christina, how about you?
For me, it would be a framework for translating metrics. I find that that's a big conversation for a lot of people in like the content space, the social space, the community space. Is there's the joke that like our work runs on vibes, and I would argue it absolutely does. But leadership doesn't want to hear vibes. They want to hear literally any other word that you have for it. So the way I like to do it is think about it like a formula. So if you start at the very beginning, if I make someone feel this way, and insert whatever the emotion is, if I make them feel this way, they're more likely to do insert action, and that action can be tracked to this specific whatever it is, and that data lives wherever that dashboard lives. But nice. You have to really think about it from like, we're going to create an emotion, it's going to trigger a behavior, That behavior is going to be trackable. And here is where that trackable data lives, because your leadership doesn't care about the beginning. But if you're really good at your job, you like hyper focus on the beginning. I want to make you mad. I want to make you happy. I want to make you sad. Like if you're on Twitter at all, you probably saw like Tiny Chef getting canceled by Nickelodeon. And it's this little doll like acting like they got the call from Nickelodeon. And every single person is ready to go to war for that little animated character. Like, Nickelodeon, are you ready to fight? Because they triggered an emotion, that triggered a response that made people engage. Like, you have to have that framework. And so that's your framework. Copy it, steal it, but really incorporate that into your work. And that will help you translate from, I just want to make people feel things, to leadership wants a dashboard.
Nice. Mel, bring us home.
So this is, I think, applies to every corner of marketing. And it doesn't matter if you're an individual contributor or you're a leader. When in doubt, blame the process, not the people. It is so easy to point fingers and, legal didn't get back to us on time, or, dev didn't deliver on the campaign. Like, no, the process, the timeline didn't allow for dev to have the time they needed. The timeline didn't accommodate what legal needed to get done. So when in doubt, you can optimize process, you can't optimize people. So blame the process, not the people, and everybody will be a lot happier.
Love every single thing about all of that. Okay, thank you. So what an amazing panel.